Welcome to this video tutorial. Today we will focus on Caspio reports and their unique usage for different projects or scenarios. We'll take a look at a live example of each of the layout options. We'll learn how to build a report from scratch and how to modify the reports to meet our needs. Let's take a look at a live example of a tabular report. This report allows users to search records based on their input. We can search based on a drop-down, date range. We have also enabled autocomplete feature, which works like Google search. And we have a few more fields to search the data on. Inside your Caspio account, you have the ability to customize your search form to your liking and to define the type of layout you want the results to be displayed in after you click search. This is an example of a tabular report created with Caspio, which displays the data in rows and columns. And today we will cover all report types so that you can see different layouts and their specific use case. Think of a tabular report more of a summary of data. So if you're displaying one or two word answers like I am here in this example, the tabular report is the recommended layout type. On this report, we have the ability to edit records using grid, which is very similar to how you edit data inside Excel. We can also perform mass update by selecting multiple records and clicking on Edit. We can download our search results. We also have the ability to delete records from our results page. And we also have the ability here to insert new records using inline insert, along with displaying images, performing calculations, and much more. Last but not least, we can drill into details to view more info pertaining to each of the records and also have the ability to edit the data here as well. Let's take a look at a step-by-step walkthrough on how to recreate this exact report inside Caspio. To build a report, you will first need to have a table created, and ideally it will be helpful if you had some records inside the table so that we can display this data on the web. In my example, I have a contacts table that contains 629 records. Next, we'll go to Data Pages to build the actual report. Click New to launch Caspio's point-and-click data page wizard. Here we'll select Reports from the navigation menu and select the tabular layout. On the next screen, we'll select our contacts table using the Data Source dropdown. This is how you're going to link your table to whatever data page you decide to create. I'll select my burgundy style and click Next. Keep in mind you can password protect your report here by enabling this checkbox for access and security and applying an authentication if you have any created under this object. During this video, you will see me going back and forth quite a bit between our live example that I have on my website and also the data page wizard, because I want to show you how when you make a change in Caspio, how that's going to reflect once the data page is published on your website. So for example, on this screen you have the ability here to create a search form, and if you create a search form using this radio button, you will be able to see that search interface on your website. Whereas if you opt out to go with the second radio button to filter data based on predefined criteria, you're not going to be able to see a search form anymore. Instead, you will see the results that you want to see based on a predefined criteria. Okay, let me go back to my search form and let's go back to the data page wizard. In this tutorial, we're going to go with this radio button and click Next. Now the wizard is asking me, what fields do you want to use in the search form? So choose whatever field you'd like to be able to filter data on. So in my live example, I have first name, last name, phone, email, state, and date. So we'll include all of those fields. I'll have first name, last name, phone, email, state, and also the date field. Of course, keep in mind here that you can include as many search fields as you'd like to have inside your search form. Okay, let's click Next. And now it's asking me to configure properties of each one of my search fields. By default, every single field is set up as a text field with equal comparison type. Now, if you click on the form element dropdown, you're going to see a lot of options here on how you can modify each one of your search fields. Just for comparison purposes, if we look at our live example, my first name, last name, phone, and email are all text fields. So I will choose to have them be displayed as text fields, text field, text field, and text field. Now, looking at the comparison type, if I leave it as equal, that means I have to know the exact first name that I'm searching for down to a letter. However, if we select contains, then it's more like partial keyword search. So if you type in a letter and click search, it's going to return those results that contain that letter. Now, for our example today, we have this ability to do autocomplete, which is very similar to how Google search works. Okay, so if I type in a letter, it's going to list me options what I have available in my table that I can select from. And as you keep typing, it takes away all of the other available options. To set up this type of a search field in Caspio, instead of having that be a text field under form element, you're simply going to select autocomplete. Now you can choose to have that begins with the string of characters, or you can have contains, so it searches all the characters from the entire word. Okay, so we'll choose contains in this example, and I'm going to set up the same exact effect for all of my fields. So autocomplete contains. Also for my phone number field, I would like to have autocomplete contains. And same thing with my email. Again, remember you have quite a few options here. You can choose to have your fields be set up as drop-downs, list boxes, radio buttons, checkbox. It just depends on how you want to search your records from within your table. My state field, if I look at the live example, it's set up as a drop-down. So all I have to do for that field is simply change the form element instead of text field into a drop-down. And then here you have a choice on how you can modify that drop-down. So you can add your own custom values that you would like to have listed in your drop-down. So for example, my first option can say select state. Make sure you delete the value because we don't really have this type of a value stored in my table. Okay, that needs to return all results if you select this option in the drop-down. And then you can also have the ability to look up a table. So if you have a table of all of your US states or any other kind of a lookup table, you can automatically link that table to your drop-down. This way you don't have to add custom values manually yourself. Okay, this is a much more effective way of building drop-downs. Okay, I'm going to select custom values and lookup table. So I'm going to select both, and the reason why is because I'd like to have a tab for custom values that says select state. And I would also like to look up a table. For my contacts table, I have my state field. So I'm simply going to link that column state to my drop-down. For dates submitted, you can see we have a nice date range in my live example, so I can search my records from this date to today's date if I'd like. And to set up a date range in Caspio, underneath the date field, you're going to have to use this button to insert a new element, and we're going to insert what's called new criteria. When you do that, you're going to be able to see these two criteria options directly underneath your date field. And for the logical operator, you want to set this to AND, because we want this criteria and this criteria. For criteria 1, we're going to say greater than or equal to. And then for criteria 2, we're going to list less than or equal to. This is how in Caspio you can create a date range or any kind of a numerical value range that you wish to search from within your table. Now for my label, as you can see, I have a nice indicator here that says from and to. So all I have to do is just change my label to reflect that so that my end users know exactly that those are the from field, that's the from field and the to field. After you're done modifying your search fields, you're going to click next, and now it's asking me what do you want to use in the results page. So after you click search, what fields do you want to display in the results page? Now, when you're building a tabular report, the recommended number of fields is anywhere between 5 to 10 fields, because if you have a lot of fields listed in the tabular format, it's going to expand your report quite wide, and there's only so much space we have on the computer monitor. Okay, it's going to look skewed if you have too many fields spread across your computer screen. Okay. So in my live example, I have a photo, first name, last name, city, company, date, revenue, and tax. So we're going to include the photo field, first and last name. Let me just take a look here. We have city, company, date submitted. So we'll have city, company, date submitted, and I also have this revenue field. The rest of these fields, we're going to include these fields in the details view, meaning when the user clicks on the details link, we can see the rest of those fields in the details view. It's not necessary for me to show all the fields on the results page because the results page is really just supposed to be a summary of my data. Okay, and then when you click on details, you can drill in to see more information. So that's why in my results page, I'm only interested in seeing these fields for now. We're going to click next. Now here you have the ability to enable some editing options on your report. If you look at my live example, I have grid edit. So if you'd like to have this capability of editing records directly from the results page like this, by being able to access each cell, in the wizard, you can simply check this box to enable grid edit. You're going to see a precaution message here to let you know that it is recommended to enable this for editing purposes if you have an authentication applied to your report, because you don't want just anyone to be able to edit your records. Ideally, it would be nice if it's password protected, unless you have a specific need for anybody who accesses the report to be able to edit. So let's just click OK. If you want the ability to do an inline insert, for example, similar to what I have here in my example, which is the ability to add records directly from the top, you can enable that checkbox. If you do inline edit allows you to edit each record directly from the results page this way to make changes. If we enable bulk edit, now bulk edit allows you to select records, multiple records all at once, click on edit, and now if I simply just change the first name to, let's say, Ben, and click update, all the first names in this column will be replaced with Ben. Now in my example, I'm not going to do that, so let's go ahead and uncheck that. You can also enable inline delete and bulk delete. So if you want end users to have the ability to delete records, this is inline delete, and we can also do a bulk delete. So if you want to delete multiple records all at once. So in our demo today, we're going to enable all of these checkboxes and click next. Now configure the results page fields. I don't need to make too many configurations here. You can see I have my revenue field, and my revenue field is displayed as currency. Okay. I'm going to show you how to do a basic calculation to calculate the tax based on the revenue column. And to do that, all you have to do is click on this insert button and insert a calculated field. I'm going to move that directly below my revenue field. And in my label, you can see that my label up here, it says tax. So I'm just going to rename the label for that new column to say tax. And to perform that calculation, we're going to insert the revenue field using this button here. And I want to times that by a static number 0.0825, for example. And I also want to format this column in currency. Okay, so when you're done, basically it's going to take the revenue from this column, times it by the tax figure or the percentage, and it's going to calculate in this column, it's going to give us that tax total. Okay. Also in my results page for my photo field, notice that I'm displaying that as a small thumbnail image. You have the ability here to display that as an image if you'd like, and then you can change the width and height accordingly, depending on how big the image you want to be able to see. I'm just going to make this a very small thumbnail, 75 pixels. Leave one or the other fields empty, because if I put this as 75 by 75, and let's say that the image that was uploaded is more of a rectangular shape, it's not going to be, the image itself is going to be disproportionate. It's not going to be the right image, because now it's going to be skewed, because a rectangular image as a 75 by 75 won't look right. But this is going to maintain the right parameters of the image once it was first imported. For the default image, so if you have empty records that don't have an image, you can have a replacement default image and you can attach that for all of your other records. And we can simply just use the image that I have here called default. Let's take a look if there's anything else I'd like to change in my results page. I'm going to keep the way it is. Let's keep it this way and let's move on to the next screen. So this is the bulk edit screen, and you can also make adjustments here as well. In this case, if I select multiple records and click on edit, here is the bulk screen. Okay, and here you have the ability to turn it into from a text field into a completely different type of form element. So for example, if you wanted the state field to be a drop-down, and in this example I don't have a state field listed in my bulk edit, so if I did have something like that, let's say the company name, I can turn this into a drop-down and be able to look up a table and select that company. So instead of seeing a text field for company name, we can have this be a drop-down. Let's go ahead and continue, moving on. This screen allows you to decide how many records you want to have displayed on the results page. By default, it's going to be set to 25. And what I mean by that is that if you look at my results page here, I'm displaying 25 records per page. Of course, you have the ability to tab over to the next set of 25 records if you'd like. So we're going to keep that at 25. You can also sort data based on any one of your fields, A to Z or Z to A. By clicking on the Advanced tab, you can also enable users to download search results in one of these two formats. Let's go with the CSV format. And if you do enable this checkbox, basically what you're going to see is the ability to download search results. You can enable that capability for the end user to be able to do so. Let's move on and let's go ahead and enable the details page. If you select this radio button, you're going to be able to see this details link on your results page. However, if you disable that details radio button, you will no longer be able to drill into details because this details link will now be removed. Okay, so in our live example, we have that enabled. Let's click next. And now let's include all of our fields in the details view, because once I drill into the details view, I would like to be able to see those fields. And finally, we now have the ability to modify each one of our details page fields. By default, every single field will be display only, in other words, read only. And if you look at my tabular format here, the way I have it set up is that I have the ability to edit each one of my details fields. So what you want to do here is select the field and move from display only and select one of these form elements on how you would like to modify that field in the details view. So most of my fields, just to speed up on time, I will simply just move them all to text fields so we have the ability to edit. And I will make one slight difference here in my details view when I come down to the comments section. Here's my date submitted. Here's my photo field. Now for the photo field here, we can also update the photo. Okay, notice that if I go to a different record that actually has a picture, let's go to Megan's account, click on details. Okay, there's a photo of Megan right there, and I have the ability to see the photo and be able to replace it with another photo. To set it up this way, what you want to do here is form element should be file, and we want to display that image as well. So if you do a file like this, you're going to be able to see this browse button here or choose file and be able to see the photo at the same time. Now in my details page, I have the photo appear a little bit bigger, so we're going to set this to maybe 200 pixels. And again, we're going to leave the height empty. And I want to use that same default image in case I don't have a photo. I would still like to be able to display that default image. And finally, my comments section, I'm going to set this up as a text area. And you can change the width and height accordingly because my text area should allow me to see a little bit more text. And finally, last but not least, we have the revenue field. I can reposition these fields anywhere I want. The revenue field, I'm going to turn that into a text field as well. And on the final screen, you now have the ability to enable this checkbox to delete records, which will allow you to delete a record directly from the details view. And you also have a link to search form. If you enable that checkbox, you're going to be able to see this link to search again. And let's preview this now to see what we have. So if I click preview before I save my changes, you can see that it looks exactly like my live example. So this is the search form that we just created, and only difference here is that I'm previewing this one, whereas this report is embedded into my website. So on my results page and on my live example results page, let's click search here to compare them side by side. So you can see how everything looks exactly the same. We have our ability to edit information here across the top. We have enabled inline insert, we have our images, and we have the ability to drill into details where we can see a bigger image of Megan, and then we have the ability to edit our records along with the text area as well. So if you are happy with your final changes by looking at the preview, if you're satisfied with all the changes that you've made, you're going to click finish now. And here is that data page that we just created. These other data pages are already live on my website. I already created these earlier, but this is the latest one that we just built. There is one more thing that I forgot to mention during the data page wizard just now. If you look at my live example, each one of my records, or some of these records, have a revenue total here next to him. And at the very bottom of my report, I have a grand total, which takes those figures, computes them, and gives me this grand total across all of my records. To do something like that in Caspio, we're going to edit our report. And let's quickly navigate over to our results page screen, which is this one here. And earlier in the video, I showed you how you can insert a calculated field to compute the tax. But underneath this field, we also have something called totals and aggregation, which once you insert that, it's always going to appear at the very bottom of all of your fields. And the type of calculation that I want to perform is based on the revenue column, so I'm going to include that field as my selected field, and I want to apply a function called sum. You have other options here on what kind of equations you can compute. You can also include your own custom formula if you'd like, but for simplicity, we're just going to calculate the revenue field, and when you hit preview now and hit search once again, you get to see the revenue sum, but at the very bottom of my report, I can now see that grand total, which is a summation for all of my records. Okay, that's one thing that I forgot to mention earlier. I think it's important to know how to perform a grand total type calculation. If you also wanted to grab the grand total for the tax, you can include that as a selected field, apply the same type of function, hit preview again, and now on the results page, we're going to be able to see two grand totals, one for the revenue and one for the tax. So that's how simple in Caspio is to perform a calculation. There is no equations that you have to add. It's just simply point and click, and then you can get to see the grand total at the very bottom of the report. And again, if you're happy with the preview mode, you can simply close this, hit finish to save your changes, and now you can go ahead and deploy this data page to your website. And this is covered in our other videos, but if you simply click on deploy, enable access to the data page, you can use one of the 5 deployment methods that we have. You can either embed this into a web page by copying and pasting the snippet of code. You can publish the report simply by sharing this direct URL link with your end users. So once they click on that link, they will be able to see that search form and have the ability to view the records. Now for the remainder of this video, what we're going to focus on is other examples that I have live on my website. Right now in this video, what we did is we created a tabular report, but now I'm going to give you live examples of the rest of the layouts that Caspio has, and we're not going to focus on the development of the actual data page. I'm just going to click edit just to show you some minor differences between each one of these data pages. That way you know the best use case and how you can modify these data pages to be applied to your own specific needs. For example, gallery layout. I also have enabled the search form here, and on the results page, what we're looking at now is more of a gallery layout where we can see a bigger image along with some information underneath that image. And I'm not going to show you how to build that report from scratch. I'm simply going to just edit my gallery layout just to show you the changes that I made here. So earlier in the video we selected and worked on the tabular report. This is an example of a gallery view. The only difference here is, again, you have the ability to select the search form versus predefined. You can include your search fields. You can modify your search fields. You can include your results page fields. You have the editing capability. And here's my photo field. You can see that on my results page I made that photo field a little bit bigger, so it's no longer a thumbnail where it's 75 pixels. It's now 250 pixels so that I can see a bigger image. We have the first name, last name, phone, and email, which is displayed underneath the photo. If you want to render this email to be clickable, you can select that field in your data page wizard and simply render this value instead of text field as an email link. And on this screen you'll see a minor difference here as well. On this screen now I have the ability to select how many records I want to view per page, but I can also say how many grid columns I would like to have across. And you can see how I'm showing 3 by 5 here. I believe I see 3 by 4, I'm sorry. And then you can see how I'm displaying 12 records. But if I wanted to see, let's say, 4 columns and have 12 records, so this is going to be 4 by 3. And if we simply just click finish here so that you can see the change, let's search again. And on my results page now, you're going to be able to see 4 columns across and 3 rows. Okay, simple modification that shows you how you can change the layout depending on how you want these images to be displayed on your website. Let's take a look at a list report. Now the list report is recommended for users that want to display a lot of text on the results page. This report is also mobile friendly, so if I were to minimize my screen, you will be able to see how that text changes depending on the width of the screen. So if you do have a responsive website, this is an ideal report that you can use for that use case. And again, if you have a lot of text, it's much better to use list versus tabular. I'm also having another feature here enabled, which is truncate the text, so you can keep a limited number of text open and allow the end user to expand the text if they need to read more information about that comment or about those notes. Now let me edit this report so that you can see the changes here. So again, I selected my list layout, and everything else is the same, search form. The only difference here is the results page. And here's my comments field. And in the advanced tab, I have enabled this ability to truncate at 300 characters to the nearest word. But you have the ability here to truncate based on your own specific needs if you want it exactly cut at specific characters or if you want to cut that at specific paragraphs. That is the only difference between list what I have here in tabular. It's just how the information is laid out on the results page. Direct to details. Let's take a look at direct to details. Direct to details report is this one here, which is the 4th one in line. This report bypasses the results page. So when you click search, it goes directly to the details of a specific record. And then you have the ability to tab over to next record if you'd like. So again, the difference here is that we no longer see that middle part, which is the results page. So notice when I click search, we can view the results, and then we have the ability to go to details. With that data page, we no longer see this. So the helpful use case for that type of data page is if you know what you're looking for without having to see the results page, you can quickly get to the details of a specific record. Let's take a look at the 5th one, which is report with chart. A report with chart is the same as the tabular layout, The only difference is that I see a nice chart above my results page, and what I'm doing here is computing the monthly revenue, so I have the months on my x-axis and I have the revenue on my y-axis, and broken down based on month, I can see what months are generating the most revenue from my data set. So let's go ahead and edit that data page really quickly here. So we'll click on cancel here. And here's my combination chart and report. So we'll click edit. And you can see this is the fifth layout. So it's basically the tabular format, same as this one. The only difference is that you're going to be able to enable a chart above or below your data set. So let's click next. Everything here is the same as our tabular format. No changes were made, except that you'll now be able to see this screen that allows you to select a specific chart type that you would like to use in your application. And I opted out for 2D column. And here is the wizard on how to set up the chart. Here's my title, monthly revenue. Looking at my live example, there's my title. On my x-axis, I have the months displayed. So my x-axis, we have the month, and I'm doing a date roll-up based on month. You can also do a roll-up based on weekday, hour, or year, depending on how you want to group the months or the time. My y-axis is revenue. I don't need to make any changes here. And then I have my Serious 1. The way I got this Serious 1 option inside the wizard is by clicking on this Insert button. And what I'm doing here is basically taking the revenue field and doing the sum aggregation across my data set. That's all I'm doing here. Okay, and when you set it up this way and click finish, you're going to be able to see this chart that's going to group your data based on month, and you can see a monthly breakdown on revenue column. Okay, and last but not least, what we have is the pivot table. Now, pivot table is great if you have a lot of records in your data set and you want to be able to summarize all of your revenue fields, or depending on what kind of computation you want to enable in your report. This pivot table is basically a summary of all of the revenue across each month based on the company name. So I would like to be able to see in this report what company is bringing in the most revenue broken down based on month. Now I'll show you a really nifty thing here. If I go back to my tabular report and go back to the results page, essentially this is showing me the same thing. If you look here in the company, here are my company names, but it's really difficult to determine, what revenue is coming from what company, because I have to scroll down to finally see my grand total, scroll up to find my revenue figures, and figure out which company is bringing in the most revenue. Whereas the pivot table simplifies that for me, and I can see that in a much better view. Okay, now let me show you how to set up a pivot table in Caspio. That's going to be the very last report type. So here's my pivot table. And there is our pivot table report. Okay, so this is set up a little bit differently. We have our contacts table. And this time I opted out not to have a search form. So if you look at my pivot table, there's no search form here. It just brings me to my results right away. Now I also have here revenue field that I'm filtering my data on, and the reason why I'm including this revenue field here is because I want to have a comparison type say is not blank. So show me all of the records that are not blank. In other words, show me all of the entries from my table that have some revenue inside them. Because if I didn't have this filter set up, for example, let's just say we remove this filter from my report and click finish. Refresh my pivot table. You can see how it's showing me the blank values as well. So my pivot table is not very clear in terms of what revenue is coming from what company, because some of these companies haven't brought in any revenue yet. So let's go ahead and edit the pivot table again one more time so that you can see here. I would like to filter my results page based on the revenue field, and I don't want to show any blank values, so I'm just going to say is not blank. And now on this screen is the wizard to set up all of your columns, all of your rows, and of course all of the calculations. For my columns, I have my date field for my table. Okay, I'm going to have to hit save again, but you can see how my column here is the date field, and that's why you're seeing the dates across, or the months, because I'm rolling that up as a month. In my rows section, I have the company, so you can see the company names here to the left. And in the middle of my pivot table report, I have my revenue field, which is the value, and then I'm doing a sum across all of my records from the table. The way you set this up is very, very easy. It's just like in Excel, depending on what you want to show on the left side versus top and what you want to show in the middle, you will simply just insert your fields using this plus icon. And then when you're done, you're going to click Finish, refresh your report, and you should be able to see your data in a much clearer view. Okay, that concludes our video on reports. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us at any time. Feel free to visit our knowledge base as well for any additional videos and helpful articles and tutorials. If you liked today's video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can be up to date with all the latest tips and tricks on how to use Caspio. And again, if you have any questions at all, feel free to contact our support team. And anybody in Caspio will be able to assist you right away. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye-bye.